Hi! It's the last Thursday of 2021 and obviously I'm not doing a news video today, but I thought I would show you a compilation of what my favorite 10 news stories from the year were, and I will see you again next Thursday for a new news video in 2022. Happy New Year! And speaking of trans-Neptunian objects, astronomers recently announced the discovery of the most distant object observed in the solar system. It's located at 132 AU, which is 132 times the distance from the sun to the Earth. Because it's so far away, it's incredibly dim, so finding these objects has been really difficult. So this is the furthest one that they've detected to date, and the object is 2018 AG37. However, astronomers have given it the nickname Farfarout to indicate its status as the farthest out object. See my previous note about astronomers and their creative naming. In fact, the previous object that held this record, which was discovered by the same team of astronomers, was nicknamed Farout, so they just decided to tack on another far to emphasize that this one was even farther out.
Australian astronomers announced this week the detection of a strange new radio source with the very catchy name this. They name it based on its coordinates. The object is emitting radio waves that vary dramatically in brightness over time, by a factor of over 100 and with no discernible pattern. In addition, the radio waves from this source are very polarized. The signal from this object doesn't really match with signals from other radio sources that might have similar behavior, like pulsars or flaring stars. And they couldn't find any counterparts in other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, such as visible, infrared, and X-rays. Basically, it's a real head-scratcher, and that means it could be an entirely new type of astronomical object. This is really exciting because in astronomy, we're limited in our data by what we can observe. So observing a new type of object usually opens an entirely new window onto the universe and astrophysics. Now, this source is located in the direction of the center of the galaxy, but there's no distance information associated with it, so astronomers don't know where it's actually located. Also, I just want to mention, because it seems like anytime a new unusual signal comes up, people want to say, "Oh, aliens," but really it probably isn't.
But in slightly less indirect, exciting astrophysics news, the Event Horizon Telescope has just released some really awesome new results. So if you'll remember, the EHT released back in 2019 the very first ever direct image of a black hole, and this was super exciting, still is. But the team didn't stop there. They've been hard at work at analyzing those results they got, and what they just have now released is basically that same image but now analyzed in polarized light. Basically means that they're getting hints about the magnetic field that's actually involved in the event horizon of a black hole directly, which is really, really cool. This is especially important in determining how black holes produce these really massive jets from their accreting material, which involves magnetic fields, and theorists aren't entirely sure how it happens. And so observational results like this are really the first time we get to test these kinds of models. And in this case, they found that only theoretical models that include highly magnetized gas near the event horizon were able to be consistent with these observations. Plus, it's just really cool looking. So yeah, this is really, really awesome work out of the Event Horizon Telescope collaboration. Really excited to see what else that they can do. If you don't know much about the Event Horizon Telescope, you should look into it because it's really cool. They basically use multiple different telescopes all over the world to create a huge, huge amount of collecting area and baseline for these observations of the very, very tiny things that are the event horizons of black holes.
Are you sick of hearing about Percy yet? Well, I'm definitely not. So Perseverance, NASA's Mars 2020 rover, landed successfully on the surface of Mars last Thursday. This is the 5th time NASA has put a rover on the surface of Mars, and the first time that the landing itself was recorded. NASA released the video on Monday at a press conference, and you guys, it's so good. I have definitely watched it like a million times, and I totally recommend that you check out the full thing. They also released audio from the microphone that Perseverance has, and you can hear the wind on Mars. It literally gave me chills when I listened to it. So this is just really amazing, and the mission is just getting started. At Monday's conference, the JPL scientists also said that they had included a hidden message in the design of Perseverance's parachute. Of course, the internet had decoded it within several hours. Basically, the message was decoded to say, "Dare mighty things," which is a common motto at JPL, and also included the lat long for the JPL's offices in Pasadena, California. something a little bit like this. So very cool. I'm sure they had a lot of fun putting those Easter eggs in. And of course, the design of the parachute itself, while this was a fun Easter egg, the asymmetric design is actually chosen for scientific reasons. So this wasn't totally just for fun. But what was totally just for fun, and I absolutely love, was they also revealed that Perseverance has a little rover family sticker on it, which I just think is adorable. Like I said, this is the 5th rover that we've landed on Mars, so they were honoring that with this little decoration on the outside of Perseverance.
So in a very interesting science story, the Juno spacecraft team has just released some research about the zodiacal dust in the solar system. Now, the zodiacal dust is just dust that we see. It creates zodiacal light. That's this kind of diffuse light in the sky. And in fact, we see this in exoplanet systems as well. And Juno is a probe that is currently in orbit around Jupiter, and in fact has really nothing to do with the zodiacal dust. So this was a very unintended science outcome. But actually what happened is that the Juno team was initially very puzzled by these strange streaks that they were seeing in some of their instruments on the transit to Jupiter. But they looked into it and they were able to discover that actually it was tiny pieces of the solar panels that were being impacted by dust, by the zodiacal dust, and breaking off, because although the dust is very small, it's traveling very quickly, and so it strikes the spacecraft with a pretty large force and was able to break off these small, like millimeter-sized pieces of the solar panels that were then visible in the instruments. And don't worry, it was the dark side of the solar panels, so they still operate just fine. But scientists were able to use the frequency of these dust collisions to actually map out a distribution of zodiacal dust as Juno traveled from Earth to Jupiter. And they were able to basically show that this dust is probably coming from Mars, although it's still not entirely clear how the dust is getting off of the surface of Mars and into the solar system. So a pretty cool way to use some unintended information from a completely separate mission to do some cool new science. And that helped us learn a little bit more and pinpoint things about zodiacal dust in our solar system, which is very useful for our understanding of not only our own solar system, but applying to exoplanet systems as well.
First up, this image, which came out last week. Wow. So let me tell you what's going on here. So planets form in disks around stars, and these disks are kind of leftover gas and dust from the formation of the star, and they're called protoplanetary disks. Now similarly, when planets form, they can have a disk around them, and this disk can form satellites, moons, for the planet, and this is called a circumplanetary disk. However, for various reasons, it is very difficult to actually observe this happening. We tend to either observe protoplanetary disks or observe planetary systems. We don't often see this actual formation happening. In fact, there's only one system that we've detected that has what seems to be planets forming embedded in a protoplanetary disk. And that system is called PDS-70, and that's what this image is. But we've known about these exoplanets in PDS-70 for a little while. So what's new here is that this is actually an image of a disk around one of the planets, PDS-70c, that this is a circumplanetary disk. This is moons being born, a moon nursery. The amount of resolution needed to achieve this is really insane, and we have this thanks to ALMA, the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array. Now, there had been hints that this disk existed before, but this is now confirmation, an actual resolved image of the disk itself, which is amazing. Also, interestingly, PDS-70b, the other giant planet in the system, does not have any signs of a disk. So having two planets in the system with these two outcomes can really help scientists learn about this whole process of not only moon formation, but also planetary formation. So this is really exciting. It's an amazing image. Super awesome. First up, we have the BepiColombo flyby. So this is an ESA-JAXA mission that launched back in October of 2018 and is headed to the planet Mercury. Now, along the way, it has gotten a gravity assist from Earth and twice from Venus, and just last Friday, it made its first flyby of Mercury. Now, it's actually going to make 5 more flybys of Mercury before it arrives in its final orbit of the planet in December of 2025. And if this sounds like a really long trip, well, that's because it actually takes a ton of delta V to get to Mercury. It's actually easier to escape the solar system entirely than to get to Mercury. So that's why it takes this 7+ year trip to actually get into orbit. But now it has done its first flyby of that target planet, and while its main instruments are stowed for the journey, but there were some monitoring cameras that were able to take some snapshots of the planet. Really exciting milestone for BepiColombo, and hello, littlest planet.
In better news, there was a really exciting announcement this week about the Parker Solar Probe. The probe crossed the Alphen surface of the sun, which basically means that it entered the sun's atmosphere. This is the closest any spacecraft has ever got to the sun, and is basically the first time that we've touched the sun, so to speak. This historical passage actually happened back in April, but it was just announced this week in a paper published in Physical Review Letters. This observation allowed scientists to begin directly measuring the turbulence of the sun's atmosphere. And the Parker Solar Probe is going to continue to orbit closer and closer to the sun, so we'll get more chances to look at this previously unexplored region.
After what seems like a really long wait, SpaceX finally went ahead with their SN15 demonstration for the Starship. Now, this high-altitude mission was similar to the previous missions, where it flew up to its high altitude, belly flopped, descended, and then attempted to land on the landing pad. However, this time something different happened. Or didn't happen. That is, there was no explosion, and the landing was nominal, which is engineering speak for the way it was supposed to be. This is really exciting news. SpaceX has finally landed their Starship the way they hoped to. It was really awesome to see. Yes, there is just a little bit of a fire here at the end. That's from the methane fuel, not totally unexpected and nothing to worry about. So congrats to this team on a really amazing feat of engineering. Really excited to see what Starship is going to do next. Speaking of Mars, super exciting news coming from the Red Planet with the very first attempt at powered flight on another planet this past week. And that was on Monday, and you guys, it was successful! I just think this is so cool. So on Monday, the little helicopter Ingenuity took off from the ground, ascended to about 10 feet, hovered for 30 seconds, and then landed again. The total flight time was about 39 seconds. Now, because of the light time delay between us and Mars, this flight was pretty much completely autonomous. And so JPL was just waiting for confirmation that it was successful, which they received on early Monday morning. Ingenuity has its own cameras on board, and the rover Perseverance was nearby and able to take video of us for this historic flight, which I think is just super cool. Now, this is a technology demonstration, so Ingenuity is intended to see if this is possible, because there's a lot of challenges that go into making a helicopter fly on another planet with about 1% the atmosphere. Like, it's hard. But they did it, and they did it not just once, but they've already done the second flight of Ingenuity. That actually happened just this morning. This second flight went to a slightly higher altitude, so Ingenuity went up to 16 feet, and it had a longer hover, and it also traveled laterally or sideways about 7 feet. They've released this image from the black and white navigation camera on Ingenuity, with more images to come, because this was just happening this morning. They just got this data back at about 9:30 a.m.